No.
When you first saw the Rockingham glove at the Rockingham location, did you notice any hair on it at that time?
At the Rockingham?
Yes.
The Rockingham glove? I believe I did see some forms of either fibers or hair at that time.
And did you do anything to remove it at that time?
No.
Now, you were also asked some questions regarding a videotape showing Miss Mazzola collecting some items at the crime scene. You remember that? The glove and the cat,
Yes.
glove and the cat. And perhaps we could take a look at that. It's 1083. Did we see the first portion of that? Maybe we can stop for a second. Can we just back up for just a few frames? Yeah, there. Now, Mr. Fung, what is Ms. Mazzola doing in this frame?
Miss Mazzola is placing the knit cap in a paper bag.
And does it,
It's 13514112.
yeah, does it appear to you that she's holding it from a corner of the cap without getting her much of her hand on the item?
She's holding it at the tip, yes.
And why is that done?
She's holding it so that she comes into a very small area of contact.
And then she simply places it in the bag?
Yes.
And is it generally necessary to go through 4 years of forensic science training to learn this technique?
No.
All right, let's continue with the tape. Maybe we can just back up for a second just to get the point just before she dropped it in the bag. And similarly, how is Ms. Mazzola handling the glove in this particular frame?
She's
135223, and I can't read the last two. Is it 25?
She's holding a very small portion of the glove and placing it into the paper bag.
And that's done for the same reason?
Yes.
And is it, again, necessary to have 4 years of forensic science training to figure this technique out?
No.
All right. Now, when she was lifting up this item, based upon your recollections of the crime scene itself, which area is she removing the glove from?
Based on my recollection, she's removing it from the dirt area.
And is that where the glove was when you first saw it?
Yes.
All right, we can continue with this and just finish it. that's fine. Thank you. Now, sir, did you have an opportunity to take a careful look at the defense video that depicts what appears to be a dark spot in the area of the white blanket that was on the ground?
Characterization.
Sustained phrase question.
That appears to be some sort of a dark area on the,
Still objection. Characterization.
what?
Yes.
Right. And did you also have the opportunity to view a tape that was created by the people showing that same footage and intersplicing still photography?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this, I don't know if we've already marked that, we as a court exhibit.
I don't believe so.
I'd like to mark that exhibit as our next in order. People's 192.
This is, Mr. Goldberg. Form, this is a minute and a half. Could we look at it? Because I don't think we saw it.
All right, just turn the monitor, Ms. Clark. Thank you. The opportunity to review that again. All right, proceed. Thank you, counsel.
Can we see? It's People's
Proceed.
192. Now, sir, based upon the photographs, the still photography, and the videography that was done at the crime scene as displayed in this exhibit, and your own independent recollections, was that glove on the white blanket?
Object to the form of this question. If he's being asked a question as an independent witness, I think there's no foundation laid for his competency with respect to photography. If he's being asked about his independent recollection, I have no objection. So I think the question is compound. I think I'm stating legal grounds.
What?
Rephrase the question.
Sir, based upon viewing the videotapes, was the glove, the ones that we just showed, was the glove on the white blanket?
Based on the video tape and the pictures, the and not from my memory,
Yeah.
just from the videotapes, it did not appear to be on a blanket.
Then I'll move to strike.
Full rule.
Okay, and now if you add your memory to the equation, was it on the blanket?
No.
Okay. Can you just see that portion? I just want to see a portion of this again, where he's laying down the cards at the beginning. Hey, now, sir, what are you doing right there in that picture? We don't have a frame number, but
I am placing the identification tag for the hat on the walkway area.
okay, so that is for the hat.
Yes.
What photo ID number is on the card that's in your hand on this photograph?
If he's asking, is that question directed to what he can read on the video?
No, it's not directed to what he can read. It's from your independent recollection. Can you tell, and your notes? Can you tell us?
Referring to his notes.
What? Yes, from your notes. Can you tell us that, sir?
From my notes, referring to my notes, that would be 103.
Okay, and that's the photo ID number for what?
That would be the photo ID for the hat in item number 38.
Okay. Now, where are you placing this card down? Is it on? Where does it actually land?
It's very close to the yellow post on the walkway area.
Your Honor, perhaps for the record, I could just describe this photograph since we don't have a counter on it. It's a photograph that appears to depict the.
Maybe we could just print it out. I think that's the
Okay.
best way to do it, rather than
That's
having
fine.
this.
I agree. Thank you. All right, Mr. Fairlawn, do we have that captured? Yes, Your Honor. All right, proceed.
Okay, sir, now I would like to show you, well, when you're putting this card down, the one that we've just, on the picture that we just printed out, where is that in relationship to the darkened area that's in question,
That would be west of the darkened area,
which is towards,
towards the street. or towards the camera.
Towards the camera, okay. All right, that's fine. Sir, I'd now like to show you a couple still photographs. First, let's look at People's 56H for identification. Okay, what does that show, sir?
That depicts the glove and the photo ID card number 102.
This is 56H. And is that where you put down the card for the glove?
Yes.
All right, now let's take a look at People's 192A. Okay, I'd like to mark as People's next in order 193, which is also a photograph of this same general area. It's going to take a second to pull this up.
Please.
Isn't that 56? Okay, and what is that?
It's the same.
This is a similar photograph to 56H, sir,
Yes.
the one that we saw just before this.
Yes.
And what is it that's in the foreground just before the card 102?
There appears to be a bloody area with leaves present.
Okay, now let's see People's 179. Now, sir, do you see that same leafy area that we just saw in photograph 193 in this photograph, 179?
Yes.
And where is that?
If you look at the identification card 102 and you go down from it, it's that area there.
Okay.
Before, oh, go ahead.
Okay, fine. Now, on this particular photograph, is the card that you were laying down in the video present?
No.
So this was taken before you laid that card down?
Yes.
And do you know when, in reference to laying the card down, the still photography was done of this area?
The photographer was taking the photographs as I was putting the cards down.
And could you see that in one of the videos?
Yes.
All right, I just need one more photograph. Perhaps we could, for the record, just have him circle the area that he's referring to, the leafy area, and print that out.
Yes. problems here?
Yes, Your Honor, we were able to achieve a black color, but no other. If you notice the dot, top
Yes.
part of the screen.
Are you having maneuvering problems here?
Can we put an arrow on it instead?
Yes. Very dark.
You make an up arrow? That would be better. Okay, more to your left. Up. More there.
It's captured.
Proceed.
Okay. Now, can we now see Peoples 180 for identification? Oh, hold on. I just want to ask one more question while 179 is on here. On 179, when would this be chronologically with respect to the video?
This would be before the segment of the video was.
Okay, and you know that why?
I know that because the card for 103 is not placed down yet.
And that's what you were doing in the video?
Yes.
And now can we see Peoples 180 for identification? We're going to have to use the Elmo. The barcodes aren't working.
Slide, please. One, please.
Okay, directing your attention, sir, to Peoples 180, do you see the card number 10? Well, I could see it a few seconds ago. Okay. Do you see the card for number 103?
Yes.
And where is that?
There's 3 cards present, and it's the one to the very right.
And the leafy clump, is that still in the same location that it was in the previous photograph, 179?
Yes.
And the glove?
Yes.
So this would represent a photo that was taken shortly after the videotape?
Sustained.
When was this photograph taken, sir?
This would be after the videotape was taken.
All right. So if we could just skip, can we skip back between 179 and 180, or is that too much?
Two, please.
Okay, so 179 is before, Mr. Fung?
Yes.
And now let's skip back to 180.
One, please.
And 180 is after.
Yes.
And the glove is in the same location in both photos.
Yes.
And so is the leafy clump.
Yes.
Thank you.
Five, please.
Now, when you got to the location at Bundy, did you know exactly what had happened in terms of any alteration of the location before you arrived?
No.
And when you filled out the crime scene identification checklist form, That's Defense 1081, if I might approach the witness for just one moment, and then I put it on the...
Unless it's clear
Hold
that
on. What's the ground?
ground is that he's asking...
Legal
he said-
ground, there are two,
Legal grounds is that the question is vague. He said "you." Is he using that in the singular or the
just there,
plural?
raise the question.
Okay. May I approach the witness, just show him the
You may.
crime scene identification checklist? Sir, showing you this item, do you recognize that?
Yes,
And is that part of the crime scene identification checklist?
yes.
Now, on that document, there's a question mark in the area that says, has the crime scene been altered? Did you see that?
Yes.
One, please.
Now, did you put that question mark there, or did Ms. Mazzola?
Miss Mazzola did.
Did you know whether the crime scene had been altered before you arrived?
I assumed it had because the body was of Nicole Brown Simpson was on the plastic when I walked up to the scene.
Okay, and you assume that when she was murdered, it wasn't on that coroner's plastic
Yes.
bag. Now, is it your job as a criminalist to start interviewing witnesses for the purposes of determining what the crime scene was like when they arrived?
No.
Whose job is that?
That is the investigating officer's job. That's detectives.
All right. Now, when the crime scene identification checklist was being filled out, the portion that lists the that's fine. The portion that lists the item numbers or the photograph numbers and the measurements.
Yes.
Did you do that, or did Ms. Mazzola do it, or was it a combination of both at this location?
It was a combination of both, but she did the majority of it.
Of the handwriting?
Yes.
When that was being done, when you were doing the measurements, were you working together?
Yes.
And were those parts of the crime scene identification checklist relating to the measurements and the item numbers filled out as you were investigating the crime scene?
Yes.
Now, I'd like to ask you about the rear gate stain that you recovered on July the 3rd of 1994.
Yes.
Sir, do you know, did you see that stain from your own independent recollection on the 13th?
I don't recall seeing it on the 13th.
Okay. And is it your understanding of the people's position that the stain was there on the 13th?
It's a state.
Can I be heard, Your Honor? Because it goes to a state of mind.
At the sidebar.
Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Proceed.
Sir, did you ever at any time even consider changing your testimony to say that you did see it on the 13th
No,
to help the people?
no.
All right. I'd just like to ask a couple more questions about the collection process of the blood at Bundy. When you were observing Ms. Mazzola, was she changing gloves in between samples that you could see?
I don't recall her changing gloves on purpose between every sample.
Okay. Is that something that is required?
No, it's not.
Now, sir, have you read a number of authors in the area of criminalistics on the subject of collection of blood?
I've read some, yes.
And did you look at the materials that were written by Dr. Henry Lee, a leading advocate of using DNA technology in criminal cases?
Sustain. Rephrase the question, please.
Did you read the materials that Dr. Lee wrote for the Federal Bureau of Investigation?
Certain portions of
Department of
it.
Justice. And is he a leading advocate of using DNA technology, to your knowledge?
Objection.
Sustain.
I didn't hear the grounds.
And move to strike,
It's hearsay.
and it's...
Rephrase the question.
Okay. Is he considered to be a leading forensic expert?
Yes.
Right. And does he say in his materials that you have to change gloves between samples?
He doesn't mention that.
Did you also read Mr. Saperstein's or Dr. Saperstein's book, the portions of his book dealing with collection of biological evidence stains?
Portions of it, yes.
And you said that your interpretation of Dr. Saperstein was that you could not use plastic as a final packaging material. Is that correct?
Yes.
But you could use it as an intermediate one to transport to the lab.
Yes.
And how do you know that, why do you believe that that interpretation is correct?
Overruled.
We
Overruled.
approach from it.
Overruled.
I think I...
Overruled. Proceed.
I recently saw an interview of,
All right.
Move to strike.
Sustain.
May we approach?
Yes, with the court
Thank
report.
you.
Thank you, counsel. Proceed.
Does Saperstein say anything, his book, about what you're supposed to use if you collect a wet stain on a wet cotton swatch, what you are supposed to use to get it from the location to the laboratory?
Not in that book, no.
And does Dr. Lee in his handout talk about that?
No.
Did you also read Lee, Ganslin, and DeForest, their work, and the sections pertaining to collection of biological stains?
Portions of it, yes.
And did they advocate, or did they specifically say how you get the wet stain from the scene to the laboratory?
Object on the grounds that if he's asking him for about a specific section of the text, he should refer to it.
Well, it was already cross-examined.
Just as in cross-examination, he was referred to the specific
Yes.
sections.
Do you want to tell us which portion of that work?
It was the section already cross-examined on.
All right.
You-
We need the reference for the record, counsel. Mr. Scheck, do you happen to know what chapter?
It starts on page 244. It's the section entitled Collection, Preservation, and Packaging.
Fine, thank you. Just so the record's clear. Proceed.
Let me just approach the witness, just so he knows what we're talking about. Now, sir, does Dr. DeForest, Ganslin, or Lee, do they say specifically how you get a wet swatch from the crime scene to the laboratory?
I don't recall reading it in that passage, no.
Or talk about changing gloves in between samples?
No.
Now, in Dr. Lee's handout that he did for the Department of Justice, does he talk about using clean implements? Well, let me ask you another question first. Is a distinction drawn between clean and sterile in the forensic community?
Yes.
And what does that distinction entail?
Sterile is free of any type of germs or bacteria. It's it's been sterilized. I mean, that's the only explanation I can come up with it.
And what does clean mean
Clean
as opposed to
means
sterile?
it's free of dirt, but it hasn't been, all the bacteria and other germs or whatever aren't killed on whatever's supposed to be clean.
And in terms of the implements that are used for purposes of collecting dry stains, does Dr. Lee say that you need to use clean or sterile instruments?
He says clean.
Now, do any of these reference works that you've consulted indicate that degraded blood will turn or can turn into the suspect's blood?
You should have specific page number citations. This is very misleading. Redirect.
Or will,
None of them do, no.
And do any of the reference works that you've consulted indicate that bacterial growth can cause blood to change into the defendant's blood or the suspect's blood?
No.
Now, you were asked about Section 52520 of the Los Angeles Police Department manual dealing with packaging of biological evidence. Do you recall that?
yes. Proceed.
I remember being asked about the manual, but I don't recall exactly what that section says.
before we get into this. What is the Los Angeles Police Department manual for? Is it for criminalists or for police officers?
It's meant mainly for police officers.
And did you look at the sections dealing with booking of samples of blood, for example, in preparation for your testimony?
Yes.
And are those sections ones that the criminalists are passed out to the criminalists for you to follow, or is that for police officers?
The manual has areas that deal with all the department personnel. However, those sections are geared towards the police officers.
Okay. Now, I'd like to approach the witness, Your Honor, if I may, and just show him 52520. It's on page 367 of the 1992
All right, Mr.
manual
Scheck, you have that?
Mr. Scheck has.
Just double check.
All right, proceed. Thank you, Counsel. You may.
Sir, I'm showing you this page out of the manual. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Okay, and does that provide that, and under the title Preserving Wet Stains, items containing wet blood, semen, or chemical stains shall be permitted to dry at room temperature before packaging. Plastic containers or plastic wraps shall not be used as a packaging material. Is that what it provides?
Yes.
And does that mean that, is that talking about final packaging or interim packaging?
Objection.
Sustain. Rephrase the question.
What kind of packaging is that talking about?
Objection.
Text speak for itself. I move that it be put into evidence.
Call roll.
My interpretation is that it's for final packaging.
After they've been dried?
Yes.
And after the stains were dried, in this case, what kind of packaging were they placed in by you and Criminalist Mazzola?
They were placed in paper.
Now, would there be any problems that would result if you placed the wet stains in paper at the scene?
Yes.
What problems?
The swatches could leak through the paper and cross-contaminate each other.
And does the plastic prevent the problem of cross-contamination due to leakage?
Yes.
Now, I'd like to turn to the Rockingham location again, and specifically the blood drops that you located and collected along with Criminalist Mazzola leading from the area of the Bronco up to the front door.
Yes.
Can you refer to your crime scene identification checklist and tell us how many stains there were and the distance between them?
I can give you rough distances.
All right, hold on just a second.
Board as well. Mr. Fairtlow will put that up
All right.
while we're waiting.
Mr. Scheck, you have the page?
Yes, Your
All
Honor.
right. Mr. Fairtlow?
The only thing here, Your Honor, is that I believe the witness has a page.
Why don't you confer with Mr. Goldberg?
Yes.
Make sure you have them.
Sir, on the page that you're going to refer to in order to provide us with this information, did you jot down some information as to the distances?
Yes.
How did you do that?
I made some rough calculations from my property reports.
So in other words, you took the information that was already in your property reports and you just did some calculations based on it?
Yes.
Just for the record. We don't have this page, that's...
Hold on.
Can we, perhaps it's just one page, could we make a copy right now? That
Mr.
might
Goldberg?
assist us.
Any objection to having a copy, both sides having a photocopy of these notes?
No, they're just notes that he's using to refresh his recollection.
All right, just give me the copy. Give me a UZB. Thank you. 3 pens. Just for a second. Let Mr. Scheck step back so he's not blocking the witness. All right, Mr. Goldberg. So you can each have a copy.
Sir, just to clarify the record on what you're looking...
Hand
Oh.
that to Mr. Goldberg.
Oh, thank you. I'm
And
sorry.
one copy
Ron.
to Mr. Scheck's witness. Thank you. Proceed.
Just to clarify the record in terms of what you're looking at, this appears to be a little diagram. When was this diagram created?
That diagram was created at the Rockingham scene on June 13th.
Okay, and the diagram itself is part of your crime scene identification checklist?
Yes.
All right, so this is an old item over here, at
Yes.
least most of it?
Most of it is,
Now,
yes.
what about the new, is there some new stuff on here?
Yes.
What is the new stuff on here that Mr. Scheck needed a copy of?
There are some measurements that, in between the items of evidence that I calculated and put down.
Okay, and did you do that just recently in order to be able to give us that testimony more efficiently when he testified?
Yes.
All right. Can you tell us, not counting the stain on the Bronco handle, how many stains were there?
Eight stains altogether.
Now, you have on your diagram and as well on the photos, some stains that are labeled A, B, and C, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, you said that it was your custom and your practice to take representative samples.
Yes.
In the case of a trail, what does that generally mean?
In the case of a trail, a representative sample would be one from the beginning, one or two, depending on the length, from the middle, and one at the end of the trail.
Okay, and in this particular case, did you and Criminalist Mazzola collect more stains than would customarily be done in this kind of a situation?
Yes.
Were there certain stains which you did not collect in conformity with the representative sample approach?
There were stains that I did not collect along this trail, yes.
Okay, and which ones were those?
That would be the ones with letters on them, A, B, and C.
Okay. But you did cause those to be documented with photography?
Yes.
Now, can you give us the distance between the stains, starting with the ones that began in area near where the Broncos parked?
The approximate distance from 4 to 5, which is, and 4 and 5 are depicted in photograph A.
Two, please.
You can see the two cards.
All right, 795, can you see that?
Can we have the picture of that?
Two, please.
We have a bad angle for the jury here.
Your Honor, maybe we can move this over here.
All right.
The distance between 4 and 5 is approximately 12 feet.
And what about the next, the 4 in the next stain?
Between 4 and the next stain, or 5 and 6?
Well, 4 and 5,
Between 4 and 5 is 12 feet.
and 5 and 6.
Between 5 and 6 is approximately 8 feet.
And where was A in relationship to 6?
6 was near A, and it was south of 6.
Maybe we can have the photograph that's marked C up on the screen. I don't know whether the resolution on that is good enough. Mr. Fung, maybe you can take a look at the actual photograph and see whether you can tell us where 5, 6, and A are.
5 is in the foreground. 6 is to the upper left, and A is up to the upper right.
Okay. And now, Mr. Fung, the distance between 6 and B.
The distance between 6 and B is roughly 65 feet.
Maybe we can have a picture of D on the Rockingham exhibit. It's People's 120. All right. And what is the approximate distance then between B and C?
I wasn't able to make that calculation from my notes.
And does that kind of turn the corner?
Yes.
All right, as depicted on People's 120, do the call-out lines show the relative positions of B and C?
Yes.
Maybe we can have People's 120F, a picture of that. Can you tell us which one is C? In the perspective shot.
In the perspective shot, C is the card in the
Foreground.
towards the bottom.
All right. And what is the approximate distance then between C and stain 7?
It was again, this is a rough estimate, and it's about 25 to 30 feet, or 25 feet, but that's rough.
Okay, maybe we can see photograph number 5. Photograph number I, does that pick number 7?
Yes, it does.
And then the distance between 7 and 8.
The distance between 7 and 8 is roughly 20 feet.
And can we see photograph K? Does that show number 8?
Yes.
Thank you. Let me resume this thing. John, maybe I'll mark the little diagram that we just got as Peoples 194 for identification.
194, small diagram.
And I'll place the 194 in the numbers.
Madam Reporter, how you doing?
Maybe I can just put this on the elbow quickly just to get the witness side.
One, please.
Okay, is this the little crime scene sketch that was part of the crime scene identification checklist that shows the various items?
Yes.
And which is the,
This is not the document, by his own admission.
well, what is this?
This is a representation of that.
Okay, but is there a part of this that's new, or that added on to?
Yes.
Okay, what part is that? Do we see that on here?
Yes. Between the circles with the numbers in them are distances that I've made rough calculations to.
Okay, so that's the new part.
Yes.
And did you do that in preparation for your testimony a few days ago?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Five, please. Five, please.
Now, you said that you did a phenolphthalein test of the glove that was located at Rockingham. Is that correct?
Yes.
And for what purpose did you do that?
I was requested by Detective Van Adder to perform a pheno test on that item.
Why didn't you refuse?
It was important to his investigation at the time. At the time he requested it.
Did he say why he wanted that information?
He can say yes or no, he was told.
Yes. Well, I'm not sure if he did or not.
Okay. Did you know that there was going to be a search warrant?
Yes.
Why did you think that it was reasonable to conduct this phenolphthalein test in the field?
Performing a phenolphthalein test on the glove was minimally invasive to the item itself. It wouldn't have contaminated it, and by carefully selecting an area, trace evidence would not be disturbed either.
Can you just tell us what's involved in a phenolphthalein test?
A cotton applicator is wet with distilled water. It is applied to a stain so that the stain is transferred onto the wet applicator. The reagent phenolphthalein is placed on the cotton swab or applicator, and then hydrogen peroxide is placed after the phenolphthalein onto the applicator, and if it is positive, immediately a bright pink color appears.
Now, sir, does the cotton applicator have to touch the glove more than that one time in order to collect a little portion of the stain?
No.
Now, you said that when you were inside the Rockingham location, you didn't see any bloody shoe prints or partial shoe prints on the rug. Is that true?
That's correct.
Now, when you were back at the Bundy location, looking at the shoe prints, did they fade out at some point?
They got lighter and lighter, and after a point, we could not detect shoe prints.
Okay. Did you also see something that resembled or was a shoe print in the Bronco when you did the search of the Bronco on the 14th?
What's the objection? Legal basis.
It's speculative, and it's conclusory, and it's leading.
Overruled.
I saw,
All right, let's go report it.
Did you see something when you were looking at the Bronco that resembled a shoe print?
yes,
And where was that?
that was on the driver floor area.
Carpet?
Yes,
So based upon what you saw at the Bundy location, in terms of the shoe prints that were fading out and faded out at some point along the trail, and what you saw in the Bronco, would you necessarily expect to find bloody shoe prints in the defendant's house?
Overruled.
not necessarily, no.
Why not necessarily?
There are a couple of reasons. One is the shoes could have been removed prior to going into the house. And second, if the shoes were still worn going into the house, the shoes may have dried off, or there may not have been enough blood left on the soles to make tracks.
Okay, and do you have any personal knowledge one way or the other as to whether the defendant took his shoes off when he got back to Rockingham?
Strike.
Just showing that he doesn't.
Rephrase the question.
Were you there on the evening of the 12th at the defendant's house?
No,
Okay. Now, did you also take a look at some photographs depicting the shoes of Ronald Goldman or his boots at the crime scene?
yes,
I'd like to take a look at People's 98 and People's 99. Let's try.
And one is the feet cut.
It is.
This is People's 98.
All right, Mr. Goldberg, we're going to break at 5.
Did you take a look at this photograph of Ronald Goldman's shoe?
briefly, yes.
And did you take a look to see whether you could see any evidence of caked on dirt in between the crevices and on the sole of the shoe?
Yes,
Do you see much caked on dirt there?
I don't see a lot, but there is some present.
Okay, let's take a look at the other shoe.
People's Exhibit 99.
And on this shoe, there is somewhat more caked on dirt than on the other one.
Appears to be yes.
And based upon your observations of the crime scene, and particularly the caged-off area, as well as the crime scene photographs of Ronald Goldman's shoes, would you necessarily expect to find detectable dust prints or muddy shoe prints at the defendant's
Objection,
Rockingham
leading.
home?
Overruled.
Not necessarily, no.
Why not?
There isn't a whole lot of dirt to track around. It may be there, but then again, it may not be there. I wouldn't necessarily expect it to be there, though.
Okay. Well, what do you mean by not a lot of dirt there? Are you talking about the soles of the shoes?
Yes.
Okay, and particularly, if we can go back to 98. Are you particularly talking about 98?
Yes.
Okay. And did this seem to be an exceptionally muddy area at the time on the 13th? As if it had...
Much of the area was dry, but there were some areas that appeared to be muddy because of the blood.
Okay. So based upon what you see on the soles of Goldman's shoes and your observations at the crime scene, would you expect an assailant who went back to the defendant's location and walked on his carpet to track a lot of dirt through that location?
I wouldn't expect there to be a lot. I wouldn't expect either way. If it was there, I wouldn't be surprised, but if it wasn't, I wouldn't be surprised either.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to mark that's okay. I'll get to that later.
All right, let's take a break then. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a brief 15-minute recess. Please remember all my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves. Don't form any opinions about the case. Don't conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you. Do not allow anybody to communicate with you. We'll stand in recess for 15. Let's have the jury, please. I'm sorry.
I didn't mark this photograph of the the printout of the screen as 192A. Mr. Fung putting the card down.
All right, People's 192A. All right, thank you. Let's have the jurors, please. All right, the record should reflect that we've been now rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Mr. Dennis Fung is again on the witness stand, undergoing redirect examination by Mr. Goldberg. Mr. Goldberg, you may continue.
Just before the break, I wanted to mark two more exhibits as People's 195A. It's a shot of the interior of the Bronco from the outside.
All right, photograph Bronco interior from exterior.
And 195B,
195B.
which is a close-in version of the interior of the carpet,
All right.
depicting
So,
item 33.
So, Mark, you may proceed.
So showing you first what's been marked as 195A for identification.
One, please.
Does this give a perspective shot of the area where the partial shoe print was located?
It,
In other words, does it show the area?
the area is included in that area, in that photograph, yes.
Where in reference to where the light is shining of the flashlight is the area that you found this partial shoe print? In that area or?
In that area, which is left of the identification marker.
Okay. And now if we could see 195B. Is 195B a closer in shot?
Yes.
And can you see the area, point out the area for us where you saw what appears to be a partial shoe print?
You can't see it very well in this photograph, but if you see the rubber mat area, in the upper left-hand corner of the rubber, there's some darkened area, stained area,
Maybe we can use the arrows to point to
a
it.
little bit more to the left, down a little bit. That's the general area.
Okay. Maybe we can print that out and mark that as 195B, Your Honor.
About 195.
C. Now, sir, is there any reason why, if the shoe prints at the Bundy location had faded out, there might be a partial shoe print inside the Bronco?
Objection.
Foundation.
Speculation.
Sustained.
Is there any difference between concrete and carpet in terms of its ability to absorb blood?
There can be, yes,
What?
depending on the, if it's thick carpet or close carpet, there may be a difference in the ability for the absorptivity, I guess.
And would you expect more absorption on this carpet if the foot was resting on it for a period of time than someone walking across concrete?
Speculation, objection.
Sustained.
Would you expect more absorption on this type of carpet than on concrete in general?
I believe that the carpet would be able to get areas in the crevices of the sole where concrete would not be able to get to, and it would then show up on the concrete.
Okay, thank you.
5, please.
And when you were actually looking at that area with the naked eye that we just saw in the photograph, was it also extremely faint even to the naked eye?
It was faint,
And
yes.
faded?
Yes.
Would it surprise you, sir, if by the time the defendant got back to Rockingham, there was nothing there at all?
To this form of questioning, I'd ask the
Sustained.
district
Rephrase
attorney
the
to
question.
cease.
If you assume that a assailant got into the Bronco and caused that stain that you just described, would it surprise you if there was nothing left at all by the time he got back to Rockingham?
Speculation in this one.
Overruled.
It would not surprise me.
Now, when you were at the Rockingham location, you saw a pair of socks in the master bedroom.
Yes.
And can you tell us whether you collected those between the collection of item 12 and item 14 by looking at your crime scene identification checklist?
It was collected within that time frame. I don't know if it was collected in between those two times, though.
What are the two time frames? What is the time frame for 12?
The time frame is 4:30.
And that was the stain in the foyer?
Yes.
And what is the time for 14?
The time frame for 14 is 4:40.
And that was the stain in the master bathroom?
Yes.
Now, on cross-examination, you said that the socks appeared out of place. What did you mean by that?
It looked like they didn't belong there.
Were there any shoes there or other clothing or pants, as if someone had undressed in all of their clothing in that area?
Not in that area, no.
Did that cause you to believe that it was out of place?
Yes.
And did you phenolphthalein the socks?
No.
Did you do any close visual examination of the socks when you picked them up?
No, not a close one.
Now, I just want to make sure I understood your testimony. Do you know whether you collected 13 in between 12 and 14? Or,
Oh, well.
You
Oh, I
can
can
answer
answer.
the
I'm sorry. I know it was in that time frame, but I don't specifically recall, or can I tell from the notes if they were
for sure,
for sure?
but it was in that general time frame.
Yes.
Now, with respect to the socks, if there were light specks of blood that had been spattered on the socks, would you expect those to flake off?
I wouldn't expect them to, no.
Did you see any blood that appeared to be caked onto the socks at any time?
No.
And if the socks were wet at the time that they were taken off, would you expect any blood to fall off? Crusted blood?
If the socks were wet,
Yes, when they were taken off.
I wouldn't expect it, no.
Now, you said that when you saw Detective Furman collect item number 10, that you couldn't recall exactly what technique he used. Do you recall?
That's correct.
And you were asked a series of questions as to whether or not it was even possible to use the scoop technique for that item.
That's correct.
When you repackaged item number 10 on the witness stand, how did you do that?
I used the scoop technique.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to mark a portion of the trial transcript as recorded on the cameras as 196 for identification.
Is this a transcript or a videotape?
Well, it's a videotape. I thought we showed it to counsel. I thought we did. Okay.
All right. This would be People's 196.
196. And what did you just do in People's 196, this video clip with item number 10?
I held the envelope in my left hand, and using the scissors, I pushed the plastic bag into the coin envelope.
And is that a scoop technique?
Yes.
Now, getting back to the Bronco, did you actually conduct any search of the interior of the Bronco on June the 13th?
I looked in the interior from the outside, but I never went inside the Bronco.
And was it locked when you saw it on the 13th?
Yes.
Now, you said that you saw a stain on the outside of the Bronco, on the door handle,
Yes.
on the 13th.
Yes.
Did you see any other stains that you recall of your independent recollection on the 13th? Outside.
On the outside, no.
All right. Now, you were asked a series of questions about Detective Furman's testimony. Do you know what the significance, if any, is of additional stains outside the Bronco?
I do now.
Well, when did you figure that out?
During Mr. Scheck's cross-examination.
And what did you gather from Mr. Scheck's cross-examination?
That Detective Furman's credibility was what the line of questioning was directed towards.
All right. Did you ever consider modifying your testimony in any way to help out Detective Furman or any other witness with respect to what you saw on the 13th?
No.
Did you see stains on the 14th in the area of the, what we would refer to, I think, as the running board or the lower portion of the door jamb?
I did see some stains on the 14th.
Sir, I'd like to show you what's been marked as Defense Exhibit 1098 for identification.
Yes.
You said that that exhibit was washed out. What did you mean by that?
The picture didn't show much detail in it, and it appeared that there was extra lighting, or the lighting was adjusted towards the interior of the vehicle, and the white portion of the picture had too much light to show any detail.
And could you actually see any stains in that picture that you were referring to that you saw on the 14th?
I couldn't see them, no.
So how did you place that arrow?
I placed it by memory.
All right. Now, I'd like to mark as our next exhibit 197 for identification what appears to be another picture of the interior of the Bronco.
All right, 197. You may. Mr. Goldberg.
Thank you. Can we see that?
One, please.
Let's just see, can we just see one that's the view of the whole photograph first? Okay, sir, what does this depict?
This depicts the same area. It's the running board of the front driver door of the Bronco.
Okay, and now can we zoom in on the running board area? Can you maybe go back just a little bit? Okay, that's fine. Now, Mr. Fung, can you see any of the stains depicted there that you were referring to that you saw on the 14th?
Yes.
And this photograph that we're looking at now, is this one that you caused to be taken on the 14th?
Yes.
Maybe using the telestrator, we can mark. Well, first of all, how many stains do you see?
There are, depending on how you count stains, 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, let's see if we can mark all 4 of them.
Okay, up and to your left, right there, there's 2 of them there.
All right, let's just have 1 mark for the
Okay.
2 of, or let's circle the 2 of those. Now, sir, when the door is closed, if you know, is it possible to see those 2?
I don't believe it's possible to see those when the door's closed.
All right, now let's mark the next stain.
From that circle there, if you go in the 7 o'clock direction, there's a small blip right there, and it's to the left of that. Yes.
So these would be 3 of the 4 stains that you're referring to?
Yes.
And what about the one that we just marked that's below the 2 stains? Is it possible to see that when the door is closed?
Yes.
Now let's go to the 4th stain.
The 4th area is back towards the right and down, and there's a smear that's fairly elongated along that ridge. That's the general area.
Can we print out this document? Can we mark this 197A, Your Honor?
197A.
Now, sir, were any of these stains that you tested later on in July?
Yes.
Which one?
The circle, the stain circled to the bottom left is the one I believe I tested with phenolphthalein.
Okay. And what about the other 2 then were not tested in July?
No.
Some fashion.
What? Perhaps we can put,
Hold on, Mr. Goldberg.
That,
maybe we can put the date of July 790. Can you write that, 794? You're talking about the stain that you said was in the 7 o'clock position from
Yes.
the first stain
That
that you
one
marked?
there.
What date, 7?
94. Perhaps we can mark this as People's 197B.
Yes, 197B.
Your Honor, I'd like to mark as 198, People's 198, an exhibit that's entitled Analyzed Evidence Report, dated 7/7/94.
All right, analyze evidence report.
are you offering this? Not really. I asked the whole document. Do you offer mischaracterizing it, it's dated as 7/7/94.
All right, would you show Mr. Scheck the item? Yes, you may.
Sir, I'd just like you to take a look at People's 198 for identification. Tell us what that is.
This is a analyzed evidence report that I wrote concerning the detection of blood on the exterior portion of the Bronco.
Okay, do you know which date it was that you did the phenolphthalein tests on the Bronco that are related in this report?
Was on the 6th.
Okay. Now, sir, is it your practice, it was what? What was the date of the tests?
According to this, it was July 6th.
Okay. Now, do you have an independent recollection of that, or is it just the report?
That's the report.
All right. Now, is it always your practice when you do a phenolphthalein test to write an analyzed evidence report the same day?
No,
Is it always your practice to write it the same week necessarily?
not necessarily.
Is it always your practice to write an analyzed evidence report when you do a phenolphthalein test?
No, it is not.
In fact, did you do some, were some phenolphthalein tests done on the Bronco on the 13th, on the brake pedals in your presence?
On the 14th,
On the 14th, excuse me.
yes.
And who did that?
That was done by Criminalist Mazzola.
And is that the same phenolphthalein test that you described to us earlier in your testimony?
Yes.
What were the results of the phenolphthalein tests on the brake pedals?
They came back positive for the presence of blood.
And how many pedals did she do?
She did all 3.
Did you or criminalist Mazzola collect any stains or take any swatches from those brake pedals?
No,
So you did not collect any evidence on those?
that's correct.
Is it your practice to always collect evidence when you get a positive phenolphthalein result?
No,
Now, did you also do some phenolphthalein testing on a Bentley vehicle?
yes.
At this time, I'd like to mark as People's 199 for identification. Another analyzed evidence report on a black Bentley.
199.
Sir, directing your attention to People's 199. It's a 2-page document, Your Honor, for identification. What is that?
This is a analyzed evidence report that I wrote concerning the search for blood in the black Bentley.
When did you first see the black Bentley?
I first saw the Bentley on June 13th.
And when did you actually do the phenolphthalein testing that's related in the report?
That was done on June 30th.
When did you write the report?
I wrote the report on October 6th.
And did the report indicate that in the various areas that you tested for blood that you did not find any?
Yes,
Right. So is this consistent with your custom and your practice that you do not necessarily write an analyzed evidence report contemporaneously or immediately after the phenolphthalein testing?
that's correct.
Your Honor, could we approach for one moment before I ask my next
Yes,
few
with the
questions?
reporter, please.
Why is it your practice, when you're collecting stains, such as in the Bronco, to take representative samples and not collect everything?
That is the way I was trained to do my crime scene analysis. our investigations, we collect the best stains that we feel are appropriate for analysis, and it would be almost impossible to collect every stain and not bog down the entire system.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to refer back to our Bronco board, if we may, and ask the witness some questions about that. Now, sir,
All right, this is People's Exhibit, which? This 26?
I think it's 172.
Proceed, Mr. Farrell.
it's 172. And I'd like to mark a vehicle search checklist
All right, that'll be People's 200.
for, actually, it's entitled Vehicle Search Notes.
Vehicle search notes. How many pages, Mr. Goldberg?
This is 6 pages.
6 pages, thank you. Mr. Scheck, you're familiar with that? All right, without the court reporter. Mr. Goldberg? All right, thank you, counsel. Proceed.
Sir, directing your attention to the exhibit that we put up here.
All right, this is People's Exhibit. What, Mr. Goldberg?
This is People's 172
All right.
for identification. Sir, directing your attention to the photograph that has the call out lines 31 and 30 on it.
Yes.
Does that depict the way that the console looked when you saw it
Yes.
on the 14th?
Yes, it does.
And was it possible for you to see the area where stain 305 is located when you saw it on the 14th?
I don't recall if I was able to see that area or not that day.
Is the way that the console is situated such that it would be difficult for you to see that stain?
Objection, leave.
Overruled.
Yes.
Why is that?
The stain is in a lower position. It's towards the back on a corner.
Sorry. Okay, now, do the various stains that are depicted on this exhibit represent every single stain that was in the Bronco that you saw on the 14th?
No.
These are just a selected portion of the stains.
Yes.
Thank you. Maybe we could just move the board down so that the jurors could look at the photo that has 31 and 30, and also the photo that has 305 in it.
Yes. All right, Mr. Fairtlow, after you finish with that, would you briefly exhibit it to our audience? Mr. Goldberg? All right, thank you, counsel. Mr. Goldberg? Thank you, Mr. Fairley.
And the stains that you looked at for Ms. Clark in July, were those visible from the exterior?
One I remember was visible from the exterior. Some of the others that we saw today were not.
Okay, but at least one was.
Yes.
Now, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about trace evidence or transfer evidence. And can you start by telling us what transfer evidence is?
Transfer evidence is evidence that is exchanged between one surface to another when they come in contact with one another. One will leave, in theory anyway, trace evidence on the other, and the other will leave the trace evidence on the one.
Now, can transfer evidence occur without direct contact,
It can occur, but it's rare,
generally speaking?
generally speaking.
Now, suppose hypothetically that the coroner's, back at the Bundy crime scene, the coroner's white sheet was placed down over the blanket that had been on Nicole. And then on top of that, there was a plastic sheet that was put down, and that occurred before Ron Goldman was put on the plastic sheet. Would you expect, given that hypothetical, there to be any transfer evidence from the blanket to Ron Goldman?
No,
And is that because they weren't in direct contact?
that's correct.
Now, if hypothetically there were saliva from the defendant that had been dried on the white blanket, could that saliva somehow float down the entire crime scene and hit the red gate and turn red?
No,
Would you expect that that saliva or any biological material would contaminate the stains that you and Ms. Mazzola collected along the trail?
given your hypothetical, no.
And is there any scientific explanation as to how it conceivably could contaminate the trail stains?
Calls for speculation.
Not finished. But not the substrate controls, or the areas from which the substrate controls were taken.
No foundation beyond this
Sustained.
witness's expertise.
Sir, what is the purpose of the substrate controls again?
Substrate control is mainly used to detect if there is some form of contamination present on the substrate. It's also used to test or detect whether our instruments and materials we're using to collect the samples are clean and not contaminated.
And in the case of the items along the trail, did you or Ms. Mazzola take the substrate controls from an area that was immediately next to the stain itself?
Yes.
Now, when you say that one thing that substrate controls can help you out with is looking for contamination, what do you mean by contamination?
Contamination in that regard would be something present that would affect the conclusions of an analysis.
In other words, in the case of biological evidence, some other biological material?
Yes.
Right. Now, of the 500 or so crime scenes that you've processed over your career or investigated over your career, approximately what percentage would you say were done with criminalist ones?
Maybe 20%.
Have you found there to be any problem with the LAPD using criminalist ones at crime scenes?
No.
Now, in the area of crime scene processing, are the ideals as contained in the forensic texts and elsewhere ever met?
It's almost impossible to do a perfect crime scene.
And in coming to that conclusion, did you also consider the views of Dr. DeForest, Ganslin, and Lee in their book, Forensic Science and Introduction to Criminalistics?
Yes.
Is there any single right way to process a crime scene or do something such as collecting stains?
There are basic principles that one follows, but there's no one correct way to process a crime scene.
And did you also consider their text, Forensic Science and Introduction to Criminalistics, in rendering that opinion?
Yes.
Counsel, directing your attention to page 415, and I'd like to approach the witness if I might, just to show him what I'm going to look at.
You may. Mr. Scheck, do you have the passage?
And sir, did they write in their book that there are no hard and fast rules for successful, excuse me, let me start one sentence earlier. Throughout this book, we have attempted to point out that every crime scene is unique and that there is no single right way to process the crime scenes. Each scene must be evaluated individually. There are no hard and fast rules for successful crime scene processing. Did you consider that?
Yes.
And did you also consider their statement, of course, perfection in this or any other human endeavor is never achieved. It is probable that no crime scene has ever been processed in such a way that hindsight would not allow someone else to criticize the work at a later date. Did you consider that?
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do.
Now, with respect to the work that you and criminalist Mazzola performed at Rockingham, did you or did she do anything in your presence that could cause the defendant's blood to appear on the items of evidence that you collected on the trail that went from the Bronco to the door or back?
Form of that question.
This is compound.
Did you do anything, sir, or criminalist Mazzola in your presence do anything that could cause the defendant's blood to be on that
Check
trail?
also because it's calling for this witness's conclusions about evidence that
Right, that's
for
still
which there's no
compound.
foundation.
I'll break it down. Did you do anything?
No.
Did Criminalist Mazzola do anything in your presence?
Objection.
Overruled.
No, he did do anything about
Overruled.
what? Reference to the
Overruled.
question you sustained.
Overruled.
objection to?
Did Criminalist Mazzola do anything in your presence that could cause the defendant's blood to show up on that trail?
In your presence.
I think I said that.
Yes.
No.
And sir, did you do anything that could have caused the defendant's blood to show up in the Bronco?
No.
Did you do anything which could have caused Nicole Simpson's blood to show up in the Bronco?
No.
Or Ron Goldman's?
No.
Did Criminalist Mazzola do anything which could have caused the defendant's blood to show up in the Bronco in your presence?
No.
Or Nicole Simpson's?
No.
Or Ron Goldman's?
No.
Did you do anything, sir, at the Bundy crime scene that could have caused the defendant's blood to show up along the trail and on the rear gate?
No.
Or Criminalist Mazzola in your presence?
No.
And, sir, did you do anything, or did you do anything that could have caused the defendant's hair and a fiber from the Bronco to show up on the knit cap?
No.
Did Criminalist Mazzola do anything to cause that in your presence?
Move to strike all of this. Last two questions. There's
On what basis?
no foundation through this witness as to any of this.
Sidebar. Well, let's take a brief break to switch gears. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to take a brief break because we're going to switch back into recross-examination. I'm just going to take a brief break for the lawyers so they can organize their exhibits and we get started again. So let me ask you to step back in the jury room. We should be starting in about another 5 or 10 minutes. All right? All right, Mr. Fung, you can step down.
Interpretation may not be theirs in light of the questions that counsel has indicated he was not considering any test results, but I think that a fair reading of those questions would be that he did consider test results when he talks about Ron Goldman's blood in the Bronco and talks about Nicole Brown Simpson's blood in the Bronco. That's an unfair inference. It assumes facts not in evidence in addition to everything else. It seems to me that a limiting instruction might be in order if that was in the nature of like a hypothetical question. When the court proposed what we think would be an appropriate question, counsel indicated he had no further questions. And so he should either ask the questions that you, as you phrased it, or they should be stricken, or the jury should be given some limiting instruction with regard to those last series of questions, it seems to me, Your Honor.
Such as?
Well, I think that may I have just a second?
Maybe
With regard to-
a response, Your Honor, before the court considers an admonition?
Well, give me just a second. I think that, to conclude, I think there's clearly an implication that this witness has knowledge of test results, which counsel says he wasn't including in his question. And I think unless the court does something to clear that up, it would be very unfair for the defendant in that regard. And so I think that the question you proposed at the end of the sidebar, that did he do anything to contaminate these samples? Nobody could object to that question, but that's not the question he asked. And so either ask that question.
But wasn't that the import of that whole line of questions?
No, I don't think so, no, because he asked about samples, Your Honor. He asked about results. The import was he talked about results that this jury could absolutely infer because he's talking about results, and that's the part that's unfair. And so I would ask the court to either figure a way to limit it or strike that and let counsel ask the appropriate questions, or strike the whole line of questions. I mean, I think that, obviously, that's why we approached the sidebar, to address that. And Your Honor specified how you thought the question should be asked. Then you saw fit not to ask that question. because primarily he wanted to ask his questions. The reason he wanted to ask his questions is because it leads a reasonable juror to that conclusion, which is totally unfair and unfounded. And so we'd ask the court to correct that misperception.
People?
Okay, I'll go.
Your Honor, all Mr. Goldberg did was address this witness with respect to what he did, if anything, and that's talking about his actions and his handling of the crime scene, which we know is hotly contested.
Ms. Mazzola in his presence.
Or Ms. Mazzola in his presence, which is an appropriate question based on what he observed. But I would remind the court, well, first of all, did he do anything? That part of the question simply directs the witness's attention to his actions, whether he appropriately handled the crime scene to avoid contamination and to keep everything maintain the integrity of the evidence. There's no problem with that. And then further, with respect to cause this kind of result is simply a hypothetical. But I would also remind the court that the defense went extensively into hypotheticals concerning how bronchofibers could have been deposited on the cap and how the defendant's hair could have been deposited on the cap or on Ron Goldman and how they could have been transferred as a result of this blanket that somehow, as bizarre as this theory seems, and I can't believe any reasonable juror will ever buy it, nevertheless, the defense has attempted to sell to this jury through their hypotheticals that this blanket was waved around the scene like a matador would in an arena, and that somehow particles flew off of that blanket and magically landed one on Ron Goldman and another on the cap, and I mean, kind of crazy stuff, but that's what they've been trying to do. And they've been doing it repeatedly, specifically with respect to the defendant's hair could have been on the blanket, the bronchofibers could have been on the blanket, and they could have wound up here and they could have wound up there because of this, that, and the other. So the defense has done that very thing. Now when we come back, and in the most mild and muted form, come back with a hypothetical concerning this witness's handling of the crime scene collection procedures used, they're screaming bloody murder, and it's not appropriate. They don't have the right to. Bad choice of words.
Yes.
That's exactly what we have here. As a matter of fact, though, what Mr. Goldberg asked of the witness is, did you do anything? What have you done in terms of this crime scene? And it goes to the very heart of the matter. The defense is claiming that all of this contamination, quote unquote, occurred as a result of what Mr. Fung did or didn't do. He's addressing the matter head on. I did nothing to cause the contamination. And by way of hypothetical, by way of example, to cause this blood to be here or some blood to be there. I think that we are really, after the defense has laid out these results in their own hypotheticals, for them to complain that we have answered the hypotheticals that they have raised is absurd. Cat's out of the bag, so to speak, if you will, and these results are going to come in eventually, not so eventually actually, with the forthcoming witnesses. It's going to happen. You know, why? I don't even know why we're arguing about this right now, because the thrust of the question is what he did and how he collected the evidence at the crime scene. There's nothing improper in the questioning, and there's no misleading evidence misleading information in it. You know, counsel started it, and we've answered it. This seems to happen repeatedly. You know, the defense opens the door and sticks their foot through, and then they get upset, you know, when we step on their toes and say, hey, we have a response. We have a response. They have tried to, by way of hypothetical, mislead the jury and confuse them and give them these wild and outlandish theories as to how evidence came to be where it is, and we're debunking it. And that's what we have to do. That's our job. And now they're complaining about it, but there's nothing improper in the manner of the questioning that was done. I don't even understand what the objection is.
I'd like to explain it for her.
Mr. Cochran's making noises behind me, Your Honor.
I'd like to explain it for you, Your Honor. He started talking about debunking theories, and it wasn't us, Your Honor, who were talking about who sees mystery shadows when gloves appear on white sheets. It's not us who was misleading anybody. Let me just get to the issue here. The issue is, if this was an appropriate hypothetical, then perhaps we wouldn't be objecting. What they did was they went too far, Your Honor. They didn't just ask about contamination, which Mr. Scheck did a masterful job in talking about contamination. They don't like the fact the scene was all contaminated, or could have been, or reasonable people could infer that. So If they wanted to ask Mr. Fung, Your Honor, whether or not he did anything that would cause a contamination, that's appropriate. That's what you told him. But they went further. He asked questions that were like non sequiturs about saliva that would end up going from one place to the other, which we didn't bother objecting because it seemed so bizarre. We didn't object to that.
Did you see the reaction from the jurors?
Yeah, they didn't know what he was talking about either, and I didn't, so we didn't object to that. But when he talked specifically about hair of the defendants, which they're not going to have, from that standpoint,